The way so many Korean dramas are starting strong but completely crashing and ending by the end of it needs to be studied because it is driving me crazy. Hello and welcome to Talk About Drama, where we talk about what's hot and what's not in the drama world. And today we're going to talk about the recently finished airing drama My Perfect Secretary, also known as Love Scout, 나의 완벽한 비서. And it started off so good, like genuinely so good. It was warm, it was cozy, and it was something that it was a rom-com haven, essentially, because there was no hint of childhood romance or a trauma. Both had their own sets of bad experiences and they were both recovering from it. But it wasn't forced. And then came episode 8 and you could see the downward draft. Like you can genuinely see it go down and down and down. And by the end of it was completely unrecognizable, which is really sad because it was actually a really good drama. So before we start talking about what went wrong, let's start about what was actually right, because it's actually a good drama. So the thing that really pulled me in was the way they flipped the whole secretary and CEO dynamics by making Kang Ji-yoon the CEO of a headhunting company and Yoon-ho the secretary to Kang Ji-yoon. And the name Love Scout is actually very relevant because Yoon-ho doesn't start off as being Kang Ji-yoon's secretary. He's actually the HR of a company from which Kang Ji-yoon is trying to poach an employee from. And stuff happens and Yoon actually ends up being scouted by Kang Ji-yoon's friend, who's also the COO of the company. And hence, you actually get to justify the title because he was literally scouted and then, they fell in love. So it's a love scout situation. So even with this, I actually went in with very little expectations because K-dramas these days have been a pretty hit or miss, and even when they're flipping the tropes, they're really not doing it properly. They're sort of doing it on a surface level, which actually happens to be the case with My Perfect Secretary as well. But I am still glad that I took a look because it's actually not that bad of a drama. And, even though it did literally crash and burn, we did get a satisfying ride until the point where it's a proper rom-com drama. And Lee Jun-hook is playing a rom-com hero, which I have been looking forward to for a century. So I'm still happy I got my satisfaction. But yeah, the drama itself is such a warm and fuzzy feel, like I said. And it's like having a glass of hot tea on a cold morning, or, well, like around on a cold winter night if you're watching episode 8. But I really liked how Kang Ji-yoon, despite being portrayed as the usual, the Sandra CEO, is actually just chaotic, really. So she is excellent at her work, but a complete mess otherwise. And it kind of makes sense because she's barely functional outside of work, which is, again, due to excessive trauma and severe anxiety issues that have been years in the making, as a typical CEO setup. And I'm actually glad that Kang Ji-yoon doesn't have the classic face blindness thing because she's just blind to everything. She couldn't even recognize the car that she's been traveling in every day. So it's not a person blindness thing. She's literally just blind to everything. Literally objects and people around her. And it kind of reminded me of Park Seo-joon from She Was Pretty because that boy was oblivious to his surroundings too, but Ji-yoon is just oblivious to everything. So it was nice how they took this trait where it usually makes the character appears rude, but they made her appear cute, and she literally at one point addresses it that I'm so burnt out from work, I literally have no headspace to remember anything else. And it's I can understand it's not really nice for the employees, but it's not just for her employees, it's literally everything around her except for her work. So kudos to that. And then you have Yoon-ho, the secretary in question, as you guessed, is organized pro max. And I think it partly stems from him being a single father, which I absolutely loved. Because usually the whole single father thing happens with the guy adopting his sister's or brother's child. And, he's the uncle, because the parents passed away. But over here, Yoon-ho is the actual father. And, Byora is his actual daughter, and I really loved that about it, but we'll come back to it in a second. And I can't imagine him getting anything done with a child at home and having a full-time career. So I guess his organized traits sort of stems from him being a single father. So he's super organized, and those skills sort of blends into his professional life, and it earns him the title of the perfect secretary. Like, if I had that kind of secretary in my life, I would be sorted. I'm not lying. And, you know, his fingers probably started itching the moment he saw June's mess. So it was kind of funny to see that. And not to mention his background in HR. So talk about deadly combinations. So he's smart, he's kind, an absolute go-getter. So when he gets the job working for June, and he's been offered an exorbitant salary for about 6 months. So he literally, after her life, trying to get the job done, even when June sort of freezes him out because they didn't really start off on the best foot. And there's been some misunderstandings between them, which did get resolved, but the grudges sort of settled in with June, and she didn't really accept him as a secretary at first. And it was really nice to see that dynamic building before our eyes rather than having it pre-built into the story. Because if he had been the perfect secretary and, you know, you sort of saw them flirting and everything, it would have been, oh, they have a history. But over here, you're seeing the history being built right before your eyes, and that's really precious. And then there is Bill, sweet, sweet child who I honestly wanted to see more of, because it was genuinely so beautiful to watch her and Eunho just spend the time painting nails, playing the jungle gym, or just doing trivial things rather than being sort of side comic relief character or like a forced problem for the relationship. So that child was actually part of the story and not just a side piece, and that was really refreshing to watch. And that sort of made the story of how Eunho and Byul actually grew together as a father and a daughter even more precious. They really reminded me of Ju-won and her father from Family by Choice, especially when they had the whole conversation about how kid Ju-won was always like dressed neatly, had different hairstyles, and like was perfect as a child, because her father knew that, you know, his daughter was already being judged harshly since she comes from a single parent household. And the same goes for Biora as well, because, you know, her father learned how to make different hairstyles for her, had her clothes prepared, and, you know, made sure that his daughter was dressed impeccably so that people don't have more ammunition to go against his daughter. And we do see this in Love Scout as well, when a kid teases Bill, and although they sort of forget about it and just let it be, which was really a letdown, because I was really looking forward to that particular bit being addressed, and, you know, them actually having a conversation with June present or not present, but see that in front of our eyes. Like, we all needed psychiatric help, and it was only like in the later episodes where her psychiatrist was like, it's fine, she doesn't need to come here anymore for regular sessions, she's well adjusted as a child. And then they try to overcome the hurdles of, you know, kids being mean basically, and how Eunho would sort of help his daughter understand that, you know, you're really perfect the way they are. And then Byul would sort of try to give Eunho the consolation that, you know, you are a good dad and you have been doing right by me. But anyways, it was really, really a small thing, but it would have made the whole thing so much better and sort of gave it a payoff, because Byul's friend Sojun got into a fight for her, but then it was sort of swept under the rug because Byul got hurt, and they had this whole storyline where Kang Jun found Byora and she got hurt, and then, you know, it progressed to something else. So Eunho did get to know about it, but it was sort of a backhanded thing, and it wasn't really addressed, which was disappointing, as I said. Anyways, back to the main point. I really did like how Eunho and June started off on the opposite ends, because, like I said, we saw them growing up as a secretary and a CEO. But we also saw Eunho successfully convincing Jiun's candidate to stay with his current company, and sort of showing us that he is more than capable of standing side by side with Jiun, which ironically sort of led to Unho's downfall and started his journey towards June. So it also showed us that Unho deserves the title of the perfect secretary. And it's not just like because he is good looking or he is super organized. It's because he actually has the skills to prove his worth. So that was really nice. And I actually liked his sort of camaraderie and dynamics with the rest of the office, because you obviously have a unit characters where people's the company that June owns has like a group of employees and they have their internal problems. And Unho at one point steps in and tries to smooth things over, and he's just trying to calm down both sides, because June really is just focused on her work and her approach is more like figure it out, because you eventually have to work together anyways. And they were actually realistic conflicts and I wasn't mad seeing them, so I really liked that. But after a point they were just relegated to the background. And they became more of reactionary characters rather than people who actually had stake in the storyline, if that makes sense. Which was a downgrade, because I actually liked the way they handle things with the employees. And then, we have Kang Jun and Yoon-ho themselves. So, I was actually on Twitter when I saw this tweet by somebody. It wasn't for Love Scare, it was actually for When the Phone Rings, I think. And there was this person who was discussing like how K-drama, like writers and directors like really don't know what to do with their characters once they get together. And it's one of the reasons why so many dramas fail once the characters go together and they try to create so many hurdles for them. And I was reading this, I was like, that actually makes so much sense, because so many K-dramas just go downhill and so fast once the characters get together. And Love Scout is no stranger to this, because I believe episode 8 is when things finally smoothed out and we saw Unho and June as a combo rather than, simply a secretary and a CEO. And it was beautiful seeing that in front of your eyes. And then it just crashed and burned, because as the story progressed, June became a side character in her own story. She was literally just going along with it, because despite everything that was happening around her, she was more of a passive character rather than actively going after it and sort of tackling the issue. Her company is in crisis, and it's literally on the verge of being shut down actually, and being acquired by the baddies. And you know what she does? Go on dates, decompress, and sort of find herself. And I'm just screaming in my head like, this is the worst time for you to do that. This is literally the worst time. And I understand they're trying to show us June finally letting go and sort of being at peace with what she's been doing for such a long time. And for so many years she's been living with this guilt of her having killed her mentor, and now she's finally letting that go. However, it's completely out of character for her, because she's built this company from the ground up. She's fought so hard for it. And this is her way of saying, I can succeed without you, and I can actually have people on my side. And it was actually good seeing the former People's employees, stick up for her and stick around and sort of try and solve the problem for her. But June being so passive was just turn off for me. Is baddie Kim Hae-jin, was literally doing everything she could to ruin June, and June was literally vacationing, going out for walks, going on dates. And I was like, why? Why can't she take an active role and do anything? And the same thing happened at the party as well, where the main investor, Jong-hoon's father, sort of challenged June and told her to drink the wine, and sort of became confrontational. And Unho stepped in and being like, oh, you have another schedule. I'm sorry, it was bad for me as a secretary. And I really didn't like that, Because as much as I like the whole, protecting trope, I didn't like the way the dynamics were flipped, but the actions were not. Because you still have, even though he's a secretary, as being the protector, and June, who's sort of the CEO, as being the one who needs protection. And had this been like a normal secretary CEO drama, we would have seen the secretary being harassed, and then the CEO would step in and be like, oh, don't harass her and everything. Why? when you're flipping genders, why are you not flipping the roles properly? And fine, in the early episodes, we saw June visit a courier with her previous company and sort of collapse from anxiety attack, essentially. And, Unho was there to support her. Yes, I understand that one. That's good. That's lending a helping hand. But over here, he's essentially standing up for her. And that really pushed me down a little because I was expecting June to stand up for herself and not have people speak up for her. And then, that sort of started a downward trend because at every point, June is just standing there listening. The courier lady, Kim Hye-jin, was literally yapping the whole time, and June really replied to her like once or twice. And they had this whole thing where her previous mentor, the guy who committed suicide, Kim Hye-jin, was very tight with his family apparently, and his kid's graduation was coming up, and she's like, oh, I'm going to meet them for a meal, would you like to join, since you maybe haven't seen them for such a long time. And June was stripping in guilt for having killed that guy, even though it was not her fault. And I thought, maybe they'd develop on that storyline. Maybe they'd show June actually going to the family and sort of meeting the kids and, getting blamed for it. And that sort of woke her up and made her confront Kim Hye-jin because she's the one who did the bad things, and the other guy took the fall for her, and eventually he couldn't handle the weight of it and committed suicide. But there was nothing. It was just swept under the rug. It was just one of the ways that they showed us, June is really feeling guilty and that guilt is eating her life. Well, yes, I know that. I can see that. You have been repeating it for such a long time. What was the point? If you're not going to address it, what was the point? And then they brought in the whole childhood fated thing, and I was genuinely like, what is wrong with you? Why would you do that? To a perfectly good story, why would you do that? Because June's father being the firefighter, her anxieties, it actually stemmed from her father dying on her when she was a child. And she really loved him, and he said, I'm going to come back for you. But, he walked into fire and he never came back. And then her mentor, who sort of was a pseudo-father figure to her, committed suicide by proxy because of her. So she lost two men in her life, two important men in her life, and she partly feels responsible for it. And that was a good story. Once she and Unho sort of made it official, she started letting go of her anxieties. She finally started sleeping on her bed, started sleeping on her own rather than taking pills. And even though, anxiety is this severe, don't get cured in like one night, I would take it. I would honestly take it. But then they had to bring the child that her father saved was Unho, and Unho was like, oh, I'm sorry, I took your father from you. And they had the whole one episode where they're separated and she's just like ignoring him, and then eventually his daughter sort of brings them back together. And I was like, why? What's the point of it? You are a 12 episodes drama. It's not even 16 episodes. It's 12. You've already exhausted 8, and you're going to waste 2 episodes on this childhood fated love is bullshit when you could have really focused on how Byul is adjusting to Kang Jun being more than a super Nuna in her life, like being someone who's precious to Yoon-ho and being someone who could potentially be a part of her family, a permanent fixture. And that could mean a point of anxiety for her because her mother left her and she doesn't want Kang Jun to sort of up and leave. And we could have seen them bond, but instead we watched the whole 2 episodes of them being on separate sides and then, moping around. And yes, fair, the whole princess costume storyline where Byul is invited to a birthday party with a princess theme and Unho forgets to prepare her clothes and Kang Jun steps in and saves the day. It was actually a good addition, but you could have done that without the whole father-childhood connection story. It could have simply been Byul is not opening up to Kang Jun, but she finds out that she had this whole princess theme party, and that sort of makes the relationship between them go from awkward to a warm one. So you could have still used it, but with a different purpose in mind. And it was annoying and frustrating the way they completely sidelined the way Byul would react to Kang Jun being a permanent part of the family, and never actually showed us addressing it like properly head on with both the adults sitting down with her and having a chat, because this girl was in psychiatric care as a child. And these things don't go away in one day, especially not in the environment that she is right now. The kids at her school are teasing her for God's sake. wouldn't she have anxiety if she suddenly has a new mother figure in her life? And Kang-jin isn't exactly a mother figure, she's more of a sister figure at this moment. Wouldn't that sort of shake the dynamics between Eunho, Kang-jin and Byul and sort of make them fall apart and then come back together? Because Byul was noticing the changes in her father when they actually started dating. You know, he was being lovesick, he was being happy in front of the mirror, and Byul was like, he's dating. I know he's dating. And, you know, but she didn't know who he was dating at the time. And I was really looking forward to those scenes, but they never came, which was such a disappointment. Anyways, we can't always have it all, I guess. And, you know, I actually liked the second couple, which were Soo-hyun and Jung-hoon. Jung-hoon? Jung-hoon. Yeah, Soo-hyun and Jung-hoon, because they were really sweet. And, you know, they had the whole typical loving the other person and then sort of getting together, being comrades in heartbreak, I guess. And talking about parent-child relationship, I would actually like to talk about how anticlimactic it was when Soo-hyun and Sojun were having that talk like, you know, I'm not your birth mother, I'm actually your aunt. And it was like, oh, yeah, okay, that's fine, you're my mum. And they hugged it out and it was over. And I was like, wait, what? Seriously? Because Sohyun's mother had been drowning in guilt because she's like, oh, how would we explain it to Sojun? How would that child come to know? And when the child did come to know, it was like, okay, never mind. We're a happy family. And I was like, wait, what? That's it? That's really it? All of the build-up, the whole conversation with mother and daughter, and that was it. Not to mention, you had that perfect opportunity for Jung-hoon and Sojun to sort of come together and actually like have a conversation as well. Because if Soo-hyun and Jung-hoon go out in the future, that's a person who's a potential father figure for Sojun. So why not have that conversation? Why not show that to us? And I know I'm nitpicking, but Love Scout is not about just like headhunting business. It's also about a found family. And since you're picking up that theme, explore it properly or don't do it at all. Don't pick things up and then leave them halfway through. That's very frustrating because as a viewer, we're seeing stuff happen before our eyes, but there's no payoff because they just left hanging, and in the end, everyone's like smiling and, you know, someone's a bestseller and they're all just like clapping for her, and I'm saying, no conversation, nothing, and it's just wrapped up in a pretty little bow. Almost makes me feel bad for Sojun's grandmother, who had been literally drowning in guilt the entire time, and Sojun was like, okay, cool. It works for me. I have 2 mums now. It was, I don't know who came up with that, but that's not how kids accept and react to certain situations, especially not after Sojun had reacted so sensitively towards him being teased for having no father or Yubyul having no mother. And then to find out that your mother is actually not your mother, that would have been a big blow to that little boy. And that would have been a perfect time to sort of build a rapport between Sojun and Jung-hoon, because he is a child who was sort of rejected by his father. Like, at least that's what he grew up believing. And Sojun sort of accepted by his aunt, but him feeling like he's nobody in the world, and then Jung-hoon be like, no, you are a precious child and you're so lucky because you have a mother who's so loving towards you, and you have such an amazing grandmother, and you're such an amazing family, and, you know, sort of getting together, the importance of a family. And that would have made Jung-hoon realize that, you know, his father actually does love him in his own awkward / really not loving way. And, you know, it would have been a family building moment. I am talking about cliches. I need cliches. Give me cliches. All kinds of cliches. I'll take it. I'm craving cliches these days because they're trying to take shortcuts and they're trying to make everything wholesome and lovely and, you know, through a rose-colored glass filter, and which is fine. But give me the cliches. Give me the family building. They built up Jiun and Eunho so well in the first 2 episodes. But then they let go of all the other characters in the last 4 or so episodes. And like I said, Jiun not standing up for herself was the biggest letdown for me in the whole thing. Because once Jiun figured out that Jung-hoon's father was actually working against her, she looked through the potential investors and the shareholders' stock profiles, and she was trying to find out, like, you know, how I can get out of this unscathed or actually save my company from being eaten or taken over by Kim Hae-jin, the bad person. And I was really appreciative of it because this is a CEO who is trying to take preventive measures and trying to save a company, and then they threw it all in the trash for giving us family bonding time at the wrong time. Yes, crash and burn is a small way to describe the way Love Scout ended. I was so disappointed. And more so because I binged the last 4 episodes. I was so excited for it. And I was actually quite nervous as well because stories that start good usually don't end well. But I was sort of hopeful because it's not 16 episodes, it's 12 episodes. They don't have time. They have to be tight in the storylines. They have to be quick because you don't have the time. You don't have the luxury to sort of sit around and wait for things to happen. You have to make them happen one way or the other. And they chose the other way. Quite frustratingly so. And what makes it even more frustrating is the fact that the bad guys only got defeated because somebody appealed to the sense of conscience. Like, oh my god. So one of the guy in the bad guys group, like Kim Hae-jin's group, he snitched on her essentially. Eventually she landed up not in jail but in an interrogation room, and since she's all shouty and being like, oh, I'll get you, I'm assuming that's a downfall, but the damage has already been done. Peoples as a company is finished. Her employees are let go. Her reputation is damaged. And all of her clients are gone, essentially. Because do you realize the kind of damage to your reputation happens when you're in the news for fraud? They had this whole happy ending, and I was just literally holding my head. Like, I know it's a rom-com. I know she's supposed to bounce back and be on her own, but really, that's a client portfolio she's built up over 5 years. And it's just gone in like a second. Just like that, because she decided to trust this guy who was looking shady AF. And his background checks cleared, yes. However, you also have to realize that you have this person who's actively out for you. Like Kim Hae-jin was sabotaging her at every turn. So I would assume that she would take extra precautions and not indulge in such shady deals like stock options for payment was not really the best thing. And accepting it without any protection for yourself or your company was, again, it was a stupid thing to do, and it was going to be the thing that would eventually lead to a downfall because it's the last few episodes. So she has to go through a rough time, and then, you know, she has to bounce back in the last episode. Like, that's a whole structure. I get it. But it was so undeserved because Kim Hae-jin was doing everything she could. Like, that lady was working her ass off to bring down this one woman and her company, and the only reason why she got caught was somebody in her group snitched on her. It was not even June trying to actively bring it down. It was just a luck, essentially. Things just worked out in her favor, so she got a happy ending. Had it not been the case, she would have been just like sad and depressed and like trying to fight her case because she didn't do anything. She was such a passive character at the end, and it was a complete switch from the Kang Jun that we saw in the beginning, who was a go-getter. She was going around, she was confronting Kim Hae-jin at Korea Way. Like she actually went there face to face with that lady, and she faced everything. And you're telling me that's the same lady who's completely given up and been like, oh well, shit happens. So yeah, it was a really hard pill to swallow, especially after everything that we've seen over the past 8 episodes or so. And if Kang Jun not being a dedicated professional wasn't enough, they even let go of all the father-daughter relationship that they had built up over several episodes for Yoon-ho and Yoo-byul, because they were essentially relegated to a background as well. Because I was looking forward to the conversation, and maybe at some point Yoo-byul's mother came back, and I'm not saying make her the bad lady, but there's a good chance that woman was going through postpartum depression and she just gave up. So it would have been nice to have that encounter where she's like, oh, she's growing up well. I do regret it, or I don't regret it leaving her behind, but I'm just glad that she's doing better. And she is going to grow up to be a wonderful lady. And, you know, there's that, because you have Kang Jun stepping into the role of a mother, essentially, for Byul. And she's no longer a glorified sister. She would be an actual mother to her. And do you not think she would have misgivings about this role, since she's barely been able to take care of herself for so long? And they would need an adjusting period where Yoo-byul, Yoon-ho and Kang Jun would sort of try to figure things out as a family, because that's the beauty of a found family. You see them build something together. come together as a family because they found each other. And Kang Jun and Yoo found each other even before they were introduced as Yoonho's daughter and Yoonho's boss. So they had that connection, and it was sort of let go. Like, yes, that princess dress thing was beautiful. It was really nice, but again, we never saw them bond, and we never saw that conversation with sitting down Yoo and telling her, like, I'm going out with her and things might turn serious. So what do you think about it? Since, father-daughter had a chat about literally everything under the sun, why not this? But I did appreciate the way they handled the friendship between Eunho and Soo-hyun, because it was not an awkward or weird thing. Nobody was jealous of the other. Soo-hyun was accepting of the fact that Eunho does not like her as someone in a romantic capacity, and she decided to move on. And Eunho was oblivious. At least I think he was. He did catch on a little bit, but I think at the end everyone's like just decided not to mention the elephant in the room and decided to move on. And Jihoon and Jonghoon actually had a really beautiful conversation where she made it clear that no, I'm not interested. I'm dating the guy outside, sitting outside. He's not my secretary. He's my boyfriend as well. And Jonghoon respectfully agreed to it and just walked out. No push and pull. No extra, OMG, how could you choose him over me? And no stupid wrist pullings and everything. So I appreciate it so much. Plus, it's a personal opinion, but I don't think Eunho and Soo-hyun would have worked out as well as a couple, because on one hand, Soo-hyun's circumstances are completely different from Eunho's. And I feel like at some point, Soo-hyun's mother would have overcompensated towards Sojun, since she feels so guilty towards him. And that could have become a point of difference between the both of them. Because again, Yoo needed psychiatric help as a child. She needs support. And Sojun, I'm sure, needs support as well. And I'm not saying the grandmother is a bad person. She's not. She's actually a really good person. And she did the right thing by her own daughter, by her grandson, by Yoo. However, subconsciously, she would have tried to make up for the lost love for her daughter and her son-in-law. And that could have subconsciously sort of made Yoo feel left out. And Sojun and Yoo are really good friends. And that friendship would have had to bear the burden, bear the strain of any falling out between Yoonho and Jang Soo-hyun. So kind of glad they didn't end up together, because they do work out well as a team, but as a team of friends, because stakes are much higher when you have a romantic relationship rather than when you have a simple friendship, which essentially is no strings attached. But it's more of a personal opinion, and feel free to contradict me on this one. But yeah, despite everything, Love Scout is actually not that bad of a drama. Like, it's actually good. There are things that I genuinely appreciate, and it is a rom-com. Like, it is genuinely a rom-com, and if you're looking to watch something no strings attached, like gives you the fuzzies, watch it. At least watch it once, because I promise you, Lee Jun-hyuk in a rom-com is the best thing that you've ever seen. Like, I remember watching A Poem a Day just for him, and it was an experience. So, and he did a string of dramas that involved blood and body parts. So, and this is one of the rare instances where you get to see him properly smiling and not covered in blood or in a sepia filter. So let's just enjoy it while we can. Although I remember reading an interview where he told his agent that, I don't want any more blood or body parts on my floor. Like, I need to be happy for this one. So I get you. And, Hajimin, obviously, One Spring Night, perfect fun family. And that sort of coloured my expectations for Love Scout as well, but it's fine. Yoo is a beautiful, beautiful child, and I am so happy that she found her family. And I'm so glad Kang Jun found her family, and Yoonho found the person that he was looking for. And, it's a beautiful drama, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. And I really hope we get to see these two again in another rom-com together, hopefully. But let's see. So I did finally get around to finishing Moonlight Mystique, which again crashed and burned at the end. So hopefully we will talk about it as well. First Frost, watch the first 10 episodes. So good. Genuinely was not expecting that. I am still waiting for Undercover, High School and Buried Hearts to sort of pile up a little episodes before I binge it. Same for The Witch, although I would probably start it this week because Jin Young is actually so good. And yeah, that was it for this episode. My perfect secretary Love Scout. I hope you guys had a good time listening to me talk about or a little rant about it, but give it a chance, really. It's actually not that bad of a drama, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Until then, I hope you guys have a great week. Ciao!